Hello, tiny friends. Welcome back to Tiny Keyhole Minis. I'm Jolene, and today I'm going to be finishing up this section of the attic, which will be the old storage space. And I'm also going to frame out this wall and add the trimming around it. I will be working on the whole floor, but I'm going to mainly focus on the old section of the attic. So I'll start the base work for the bedroom floor, but I'll come back to that when I am working on the bedroom. This section of the attic took about a week to complete, so let's get started. The first thing I did was added a piece of paper to cover up the second floor to protect the rooms. The floor has some sort of varnish on it, so I need to sand it down to remove that coating so I can add some work to it. I'm just using a piece of sandpaper around a sandy block. I'm just using a damp paper towel to wipe up the sawdust, and I would definitely recommend wearing safety goggles when sanding, especially this amount. I had my glasses on, and that was still not enough. I did wear my mask, so I would definitely recommend protecting your eyes and your lungs and wear your safety gear. Now I'm just popping this wall into place so that I can trace it out where it's going to be sitting. And this way I'll know what section I need to paint for the older attic and where I need to stop. I'm going to use black for the base of this section, and I'll be adding wood and support beams onto the wall. But I just want to show you the difference. So I'm starting off with black acrylic. I am using a cheap acrylic paint, so that's probably a factor as to why it's so thin. But you can see with the black acrylic, well, I'm definitely going to need a second layer. So more than one coat with the black acrylic. And I'm pretty sure even if I used a better brand, I would still need two coats versus the chalk paint. I'm going in with the black chalk paint, and you can see how thick this is and how opaque it is. I'm only going to need one coat of this. So using the chalk paint is what I'm going to be doing. Now, if I was just painting the walls and not putting anything over it, if I was using the chalk paint, I would definitely coat it with a matte varnish to protect it because chalk paint scratches easily. Today I won't need to because, like I said, I'm going to be applying the wood. But if you want to use chalk paint for your wall coloring, just make sure you protect it with a varnish. Okay, now that I got the walls done, I'm going to do some work to the floor. And you can see I did get that varnish off and I got to wear it down a little bit, but I want to wear it down a little more. So I'm going to use this desert sand color acrylic paint, and I'm just going to dry brush it all around just to wear down the floor a little more. This will give me that effect I'm going for without having to sand anymore because sanding is quite rough and dangerous and it takes a lot of time. I could have brought in my electric sander, but I'm not going to do all that. I'd rather do it by hand than just set up the machine and go through all that, which I guess is just being lazy because it doesn't take much to do that. But to avoid sanding, I'm just going to use the dry brushing and the acrylic paint to give it that same effect. Okay, to make the floor look old and worn down, it's a layering process. So right now I'm going in with a watered down black acrylic, and then I'll dab up any excess water with a paper towel. For the bedroom floor, I want more of a white floor, but I don't want to cover it completely. So since I'm working on the floor, I'm going to give it its base coat and just go over with a little bit of white acrylic, and I'm just dry brushing it. But I do end up switching this brush out because it's just not doing the job fast enough. So I'm using this brush, which is more of a dry brush, but I'm still not getting the effect that I'm going for. Um, it is, but it isn't going fast enough for me. So I'm switching out with a chip brush, which works really well. But in order to get all the way to the back of the wall, I'm going to remove the stick so I can get back in there. Now, this works really well, and I can get all the way back to the back wall. And I do want a little more white than this, but I don't want to cover it completely. I am going to go back in to age the floor when I work on the bedroom. But for now, since I'm working on the floor, I thought it would be good to just go ahead and begin the base work on the bedroom floor. Okay, I'm going to use these square dowels for support beams, and I only have a couple of each size. So they are different sizes, but that's okay. I'm going to just play around and see where I need to place them. I'm thinking 3 will go on the back wall, and then this one will go here in the middle of this side wall. And I'm going to go ahead and paint them with the raw umber. That's what I use to paint the support beams on the wall with the door. So I want to make sure that they match up. And right now I'm just playing around with the scrap pieces because I do plan on adding a few more support beams. I'm just not, at this point, I'm just not sure where, but I'll figure that out. I'm also going to use coffee stir sticks for the planks along the walls. Okay, I've got my support beams painted and I'm using tacky glue and I'm just going to pop these into place. Now, this did take a little bit longer. Um, I actually had to hold the pieces and put pressure on them until they took hold. So I'm just speeding this up because there's so much work to be done to this space. Okay, my support beams are in place and I'm going to begin on the side wall. Now, for the first few layers going up from the floor, I'll have to use 2 coffee stir sticks because they're not long enough. So I'm going to stagger the cuts so they don't all line up. And the first pieces that will be attached to the angle wall have an angled cut that I used my miter shears to cut so that they can sit flush up against that back support beam. And then these ones will just be a straight cut. Once I get up so far uh, up the wall, I'll begin just using 1 coffee stir stick because they'll be able to fit. I am leaving a space between each plank because I do plan on putting some sort of insulation in between those. Okay, this is what the side wall looks like completed. And I did go all the way up to the very top. The back wall will look like this as well. And now I'm going to use this tissue paper to put in place for insulation instead of using plaster. I thought this would be a good idea. I love the color. I thought it would be easy enough. It's definitely going to be less messy, and then I can just use tacky glue to put these little pieces into place. So I'm just tearing off tiny little bits, kind of scrunching them up and gluing them right in between the planks. I'm only going to do half of this wall just for now to see how I like it because I'm still not sure how I feel about this. So I'm just going to do half of it for now and then I'll take a couple days to figure it out and decide. But after I do this half of the wall, I'm going to go ahead and continue on to the back wall to add the planks. Now I'm just staggering the pieces and I'm making them different lengths so they're not all the same and there will be missing parts and gaps in between the spaces. So it'll kind of be like the keys. I guess this is like the lath and plaster. Is that how you say it, the lath? The planks are the lath, and then the tissue paper would be the plaster. Now, I could very well use a plaster of some sorts or a filler, and I can use a lightweight spackling of some sorts. In that case, I would probably go with the frosting bag method and maybe add a little bit of glue to the spackling, thin it down a little bit, put it in a baggie, and snip off a very tiny piece of the corner and then just squeeze it into these spaces. Whether or not that's going to be a successful method is to be determined. I just feel like that's what makes more sense to go that route. I have no idea because I've never tried that. That's just what my brain came up with if I were to use some sort of spackling. But I think that the tissue paper is giving me the same effect that I'm trying to go for without having to go through all that and risk all that mess or just having to go through all that work. I have taken a few days to decide whether I like the tissue paper or not. And I have tweaked it a bit, snipped it down some, trimmed it down, and I think that it's going to work. So I'm going to stick with the tissue paper instead of going the other route with some sort of plaster or spackling. And I think that it's giving off the same aesthetics that I'm going for. So I'm definitely going to stick with the tissue paper. So right now I'm just cutting the sticks down to size, using tacky glue, and popping them into place, leaving little spaces in between each plank. And even though you're not going to see the very top, I am going all the way up to the top because to me it just feels more complete and I just feel better that way. So I am going all the way up to the very top. Okay, so continuing on to this half of the wall, I'm making sure to line the planks up with the previous side so that they all look consistent and that they all look like they're in the same row. Of course, this part took the longest for this project, and I did end up running out of the coffee stir sticks. So I took a couple days off and went and got some more, and now I'm back at it. But this part was pretty tedious, and I do not like tedious, but definitely worth the effort and the work that it took in the end. Okay, so I figured out where I wanted to place the extra support beams, and I've painted those scrap cuts. And so I'm going to put the two smaller pieces down on the bottom, and then the two larger pieces will be angled on the top. Before I actually attach these support beams, it's going to be easier for me to go ahead and age the walls now while they're not in place so they don't get in the way. And I'm just using my black chalk pastels and a little bit of water on my brush. It just gives it more of a contrast and I don't have to use as much of the chalk. I am going into the midsection here and there a little bit, but I'm going to apply most of the aging around the sides of the sections closer to the bigger support beams. Okay, this is what it looks like and where I'm at. And I almost installed those additional support beams and I stopped myself because I got to finish adding the insulation. If I put those beams in, they're just going to be in the way. So I went ahead and finished off the side wall, and now I'm going to go ahead to the back wall. So I'm just tearing off little bits. This is a 2-ply tissue paper, so I am peeling the pieces apart so that I'm just using a single sheet. I'm rolling it, I'm scrunching it, and I'm dipping it in the glue and then placing it in between the planks. And I'm going to start in the middle. It doesn't really matter where I start because I'm going to be staggering them so I can work from any section. The hardest part of this was getting down to the very bottom, probably for the first 4 or 5 rows. It was a bit difficult getting in there, but it was still manageable. I'm making sure to tear my pieces at different lengths so that they're not all the same length. And then I'm leaving gaps in between the pieces, in between most of the pieces. I would imagine that the old man or whoever renovated the house used this paper method for insulation. I feel like I've seen this before instead of some sort of plaster. There was some sort of paper insulation used. So I'm totally okay with this method working with this tissue paper and thinking that either the old man came up here and did this to warm the house a little more, using the paper method to be more efficient, or due to lack of finances because they are just a farming family, or that this method was used when the school was renovated to a house. So now I'm just going in to age the floor, and I'm using the black chalk pastels just to bring out some of the age and detail in the floor. Now that the floor is done, I did spray it with hairspray and I gave it a couple layers, letting each one dry in between just to keep that chalk pastels from rubbing off. And I'm going to go ahead and finally glue in my support beams. Right now I'm just placing them to make sure I have them the correct way. And I'm just going to use some tacky glue for this. The top beams were a little more challenging to get to stick. This one doesn't really have any support on the top. I just glued it up into the wedge in the very top of the ceiling. And then the second beam sits along the wood panel. Okay, next I created a little box to kind of hide the lighting cord that goes into the sewing room. And this little box says Dad's Books. So I'm just going to kind of just conceal the cord inside this little box. Now don't pay attention to my red tape. Somebody took my black electrical tape and did not bring it back. So I had to use red duct tape for my electrical cord. But I'm just going to glue it down into place just like so, randomly in the middle of the floor. And I'm placing some tacky glue on the bottom, and then I'm actually going to use one of my big bricks of clay to sit on top for weight and let it sit for a little while before I actually ravel this cord up and put it into place. So the box is glued down completely nice and snug, and I'm just going to ravel the cord up and just push it down into the box, and this will hide this cord so you don't see it, and I'll still be able to use it. I'm not going to glue the top part closed. I'm just going to use the folding method to fold the box like I do normally to my boxes. And I don't know what it's called. Like, for some reason, I want to call it the French fold. I don't know. There's a name for it, but I'm just going to do that method. This way I can get in and out and turn the switch on and off, switch the battery out when needed, and you don't even know it's there anymore. It's just a box of Dad's Books. Okay, I also want to add some cobwebs or spider webs, so I'm going to use a used fabric sheet. This idea came from Shira at Queen City Minis. I saw her use this method in one of her projects, and I also used it on the gate for the pet cemetery, and it worked out pretty well. So I'm going to use it again and just add a few webs around the support beams. And speaking of which, for those of you that are watching the Pet Cemetery project, I will be returning to that in September. I'm going to be working on the cemetery for the whole month of September, celebrating Stephen King's birthday. So stay tuned for that. I will be going back to that project. This stuff is hard not to go crazy with because I just wanted to add them everywhere, but I didn't want it to look like a haunted attic. So I had to have control. Self-control was key to this. I also added some on the wall, and it was just so much fun to add this stuff that I really had to use self control because I just wanted to put this everywhere. But I didn't want it to look like they had a spider infestation. Now, I also made a light and um, making this bare bulb light bulb. If you guys want to see how I did that and you have not seen that yet, I'll put a link in the description box below. When I created the first one that is now in the sewing room and concealed in the box of Dad's books. Okay, I had to get a little creative for installing this light because there's really not a place to do that. So I got a thumbtack and I was thinking I'm going to push this thumbtack into the back of the board up here near the ceiling and then hang the light cord from that. And then somehow I have to figure out how to pin up the light switch and the battery pack. But now that I'm looking at the cord hanging down, I can see that the chain is way too long. So I'm going to go ahead and trim that down. And then I'm going to come back and explain how I am installing this light or what I came up with. Okay, the wood is super hard. So I'm going to use one of my tools to help get this tack into place. It's not in there fully all the way, but it's in there good enough and tight enough that it's going to work. I have this little metal strip that broke into two pieces, and I placed magnets on the back of the switch and battery pack so they can just stick to these metal pieces. I'm going to glue these metal pieces up into place, and then I will be able to just kind of ravel it up and attach the switch and battery pack, and you won't even see none of this. Pretty nifty, right? I totally rigged it, but it's going to work, and it's what I could come up with. Now I'm using this glue that I purchased off of Temu. It's kind of like E6000, but it's B7000. It's very sticky and it's also pretty thin for it to be a thicker glue. So, of course, I made a mess and I'm going to have to leave these pieces overnight before I try to attach the switch and the battery pack. So right now I have the switch on just to get a good placement. And this is actually what it looks like. So you can see the pieces are not straight because I couldn't see back there to place them, but it doesn't matter because you can't see them and it works perfectly fine. So I let these pieces sit overnight, came back and installed the light, and it works. And you can't even tell that that's there. Way to go. Okay, so now it's time to put the wall back into place. Now, I am not going to glue the wall at this time, but I will be gluing in the wall when this is all said and done. I decided not to glue the wall in case I needed to remove it while I was working on the bedroom. So I'm just popping it into place. It's pretty tight and snug as is. So I don't even have to glue it if I don't want to, but I'm going to end up gluing it eventually. So now I'm just putting all these little pieces back into place. Most of this stuff is the Christmas decor from the 12 Days of a Vintage Christmas series. And if you guys missed that or would like to see that, I'll link the playlist in the description box below. There's also a free printable that you can create this set with yourself. I do intend to create a few more boxes to go around Dad's books, so there's not just one random box in the middle of the floor. And I'll eventually add more in here. I don't want to go crazy and overpack it, but I feel like there definitely needs to be more stuff in the attic. So this is what it looks like with the lights off and the light on. And I am really happy with how this came out. Um, Again, it took about a week, but I did take some breaks in between. And here's what it looks like with the lights on. So I'll just eventually fill the space with random things as I come across them or make them. Well, tiny friends, that completes this section of the attic. I hope you all have enjoyed this project today. And if you have, please don't forget to click that like button and give it a thumbs up. And let me know what you think about the new old attic space in the comments below. I hope you've been inspired to use some of these techniques in your own projects. The Christmas decor came from a free printable that I found on Pinterest. It's a large vintage Christmas decor box set. That's a lot, but you get a lot. And you get to keep it for free and print out as many as you would like and make it yourself. So if you'd like to have that, just click the playlist in the description box below. I did a 12 days of a vintage Christmas special, and each episode was pretty short and super fun. And each day I created something different. So you can see how I made the vintage Christmas tabletop trees and the poinsettias, along with that box of old Christmas stuff. And also how I filled the boxes with all their contents, along with two iconic Christmas decor pieces, the leg lamp and the Charlie Brown tree. As always, I'd like to thank everybody for subscribing and welcome to all my new subscribers. Thank you all for your support and helping my channel to grow. Until next time, tiny friends, I hope you all have a lovely day and I will see you all on the mini side. Bye-bye.